Teaching our kids to feel positive about themselves and their changing bodies in the face of so many conflicting messages is hard. In my experience as a pediatrician, parents do at times shy away from tackling this head on for fear of saying or doing the wrong thing. Today, I'm speaking with the author of a new book from the American Academy of Pediatrics aimed at helping both kids and parents take on this very topic. Welcome to Healthy Children, the podcast for parents from the American Academy of Pediatrics. I'm Dr. Edith Bracho Sanchez. I am a pediatrician and a mama figuring it out. This is a judgment-free space where all questions are good questions and the answers will hopefully be even better. Let's get started. Today, I have with me Dr. Whitney Casares. She is a pediatrician, CEO, and founder of Modern Mommy Doc and the author of the new book from the AAP, My One-of-a-Kind Body, The Ultimate Guide to Caring for Me. Whitney, congratulations on your new book and welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Whitney, I read the book and loved it. You've crafted this really unique set of characters who can all teach kids and adults something. And I really appreciated the way that you weaved storytelling with teachable moments and facts about our bodies. For people who are hearing about your book for the first time, how would you describe it?
Yeah, so this book really is meant to allow kids to see themselves as healthy, no matter what size, what shape, what color body that they are living in. I wanted it to be really inclusive. And I also wanted it to be really accessible. So we have tons of books that are out there that teach kids in a really didactic format, like here's the information to kids about health, about fruits, about vegetables, that type of thing. But the stories had to come first for me because I have my own kids. I have a 9-year-old and a 12-year-old, and I know that they relate to characters first. If they can see themselves in a character, then they will follow that character and do what that character does. And so the book actually follows 5 friends that meet at Camp Corazon, which is this really lovely, body positive, body confident place. And then they go back to their respective homes in different parts of the country with very different family structures and with very different experiences with their schoolmates, with their friends, with their family members. And they have to kind of deal with the real world, which isn't always super body positive. And then they learn lessons along the way. And then I come in and teach kids in a more didactic format. Okay, here's how you can take those lessons that the kids learned and apply them to your own life.
Yeah, I loved the format so much. I wanted to ask you, Whitney, why write this book and why write it now? It feels like a book that could have been written 10 years ago, 10 years from now. Why did you write it and why did you write it now?
You know, my oldest daughter came to me when she turned about 10 and asked, am I fat? And it was one of those moments where it was so difficult because unlike the generations before us, where, I remember my mom wrapping herself in a towel as she was getting out of the shower and saying, don't look at this big body, very diet culture-esque. I am not that way. I have tried from the get-go, especially as a pediatrician, to really be supportive of my kids and to create a healthy relationship with their body and with food. And yet somehow they still had these questions about, is my body okay? Is my body good enough? My oldest daughter is autistic. She has level 1 autism. And so, especially for her, she lives in a body that's not your traditional, skinny kid. She lives in a bigger body. We have different foods that she has preferences for. And so these questions I started kind of thinking about, okay, obviously I'm saying all the right words, but what additional resources, what additional messages does she need to hear maybe from kids that are like her instead of just coming from me? What additional information do I need to be passing along? And knowing she's not the only kid out there like this. We are living in a world where kids have social media, where kids, of course, still have their family members, and also where we as pediatricians still have a lot to learn and a lot to get even better at of giving kids that confidence in their body. So that's why it felt like just the right moment. The other thing that I want to add in is we have some books that were written in the past that are amazing books that are about body confidence, but they do tend to have a more stereotypical look to the characters. And maybe like, well, I'll just say it, like a skinny white girl, who is the main character in the book. And so I wanted to make sure that we had representation of these different body types and different backgrounds of kids.
Yeah, and that was, what jumped out at me right away when I picked up your book, right? It's just how different and unique each character is. And again, I think from the perspective of making sure that kids feel seen, it is so important to do that, right? So, say a parent wants to know what to expect from it. Say, they go pick it up and they want to know at the end of this book, what is my kid going to be able to verbalize or how are they going to feel? Tell us, what can parents expect, Whitney?
Yeah. So I think number one, they're going to expect that their kids will learn a lot of body and food literacy. So literacy is really understanding how something works, how it helps your body to function. That was important to me because there's a lot of messaging out there, which I love, that's about body positivity, like just love your body, everybody's a good body. That's amazing. But our kids are pretty smart. They know that in this world, there's still a lot of diet culture messaging out there. And so that's not enough. So this book really teaches kids, how does a type of movement, how does running, how does riding your bike, how does dancing around the kitchen, how does that help your heart to be healthy? How does that help you to have better sleep, for example? In the same way, what do different foods do for my body? What foods are good foods because they're fun foods, because they have cool colors, because they taste really good? And what foods are great foods because they provide a lot of lasting energy for my body? This book does not say you should never have sugar until you're 11 years old, because that's unrealistic for families. This book says we know that eating those foods are going to be part of life. That's an amazing part of life, but that there are other foods out there that also should be included. It also gives kids tools for really getting into a healthy relationship with food by exploring different tastes and textures with maybe gardening or going to a farmer's market or helping to cook maybe a food that's part of your family tradition, like tamales, or maybe you're going to be making the biryani. Like you're going to be making foods that are part of what would be part of your culture and understanding that those are good foods as well. And then I think the other really important message in the book that kids will come away with is that as their bodies change and grow, so as they go through those early puberty changes, that it's okay to feel weird in your body. It's okay to feel uncomfortable and awkward in your body, that it's normal for your body to not look like TikTok influencers, that it's like normal to have zits on your body, on your face. And what can we do to kind of optimize our skin, optimize all those things, but that at the end of the day, you're not a bad person, you're not different than anybody else if you have some of those things going on. So it teaches kids how to care for their bodies in a way that's going to help them to have a healthy relationship over time, but it doesn't shy away from the fact that we all have things about our bodies that are kind of quote unquote imperfections or things that we wish we could change or things that we feel weird about.
Yeah, I love the realness, Whitney. The literacy aspect that you bring into it, I think is so valuable, obviously, because our kids, as you said, need more than everybody's a great body, right? Like they need that literacy piece that you're mentioning. But I also think that realness aspect of it, right? Like how does this apply in the real world when you're making different foods, when, the reality is that our bodies are not perfect, and how do we deal with that? So it's that realness that definitely jumped out at me as well. Now, Whitney, what is the best way to read this book? And what I mean by that is, do you suggest that parents read along with their kids and have a conversation? How do we get the full benefit of the wisdom that you've put into this book?
I think that's a great question. I think it can be used in a number of different ways. So for a parent and a child, this is a great book to leave in the bathroom to have kids be able to, read on their own. My kids, I know whenever I hand them a book and say, read this, they just go, no, I'm not going to. But if there's a book that's left around on a coffee table, in the bathroom, in the bedroom, they pick it up and they look at it and they see what's going on in there. The other way, though, that I think this book can be used is in conjunction with your pediatrician. So it can be really challenging, I think, for parents to bring up body changes and or concerns that they have about what's happening with a child's habits around food or around movement with a child directly. So sometimes it can be helpful to either have a pediatrician recommend this book to a kid to read, and or for a parent to bring this book to the pediatrician to say like, hey, this is a book that I saw, I'd love to have a conversation like around this book. It can help to spark that conversation without it feeling really abrasive or in a way that feels confrontational to a child. If you are bringing up, for example, okay, we might need to go see a specialist because we're having really wide swings in a child's weight or in a child's body habitus, and it's making us are we concerned about diabetes, high blood pressure, things like that? And or on the opposite end of the spectrum, we're concerned that you're not eating enough, that really you might be having some body image issues and that we might be heading in the direction of an eating disorder. So this is also a nice kind of gentle way to approach those topics in a way that I think can feel a lot more approachable for kids. The other thing that I'm doing on the back end is talking to schools about using this in curriculum for teachers and for school psychologists. The more that these types of conversations are normalized for a kid, and again, that they've maybe like seen these characters somewhere outside of their own home, then the easier it is for them to pick up this book and start reading it. But for a parent themselves, I would say best way is to either, pick up the book and put it in your kid's bathroom, in their bedroom, and or if your kid has questions about puberty or about their changing body, or they have that same question that my child asks, am I fat? Am I having a problem? Is my body okay? This is a great book for that as well.
Yeah. And, I'm hearing you describe it and the way that you hope it'll be used. And I'm so glad you're bringing it to schools, first of all. And then, in our offices, it's so interesting because sometimes we try so hard to be careful with the language that we use, to frame questions, to frame things in our counseling in a way that is positive and inclusive and, doesn't alienate kids in any way. And yet you still see the kids in the corner that tense up, that don't want to talk about certain things. So any tools that we can use or deploy to help kids feel a little bit better about everything that's happening, it's just so wonderful to have, really. Now, the other thing that we discuss in our offices, as you know, Whitney, is how conversations and communication with our kids can be protective. So I wonder, in that context of protection, how you think this book fits into that larger picture.
Yeah. I think one of the big places is about bullying, body bullying, but also the principles that we teach kids in this book about how to prevent bullying or how to address it. They aren't just about body bullying. They apply to all kinds of bullying, right? Getting a team in place, talking to an adult, having some comeback phrases you can use when there's a bully, making sure that you're loud about it with the people in your life that you can trust. So that way you aren't continuing to get bullied. Having conversations about, if I do feel bad about my body continuously, I'm starting to really feel terrible about it, talking to someone really soon. Talking to your parents if there's a friend or a teammate who you feel like is really struggling with their body image. So those, I think, are really protective factors that we can talk about. And to your point about pediatricians, I think the most important thing for parents to know is pediatricians always want the best for kids. We want to be team members with families. We never want to do harm. In fact, like when we are taking our oath of becoming a doctor, we always say like, first, do no harm. At the same time, in the past, we've been more focused on BMI and on the numbers, I think because we haven't had tools that have been any better. And there are new tools that are starting to be developed that measure like central fat adiposity, which is kind of like that amount of fat that lives in like the central abdomen, those types of things that are going to, I think, eventually be better measures of a child's health when it comes to size and comes to weight. But we still can learn and still do better. And so I think that having those conversations with your pediatrician, if you have concerns about your child and kind of what direction things are going, we are always so open to having those conversations ahead of time before you come into the office. If you want to write us a quick note, send us a quick message. If you want to, pull us away in the hallway before we go in with your child, those can be really helpful. And those are protective as well, because that allows us to make sure that we are protecting the mental health of a patient when they come in. So I think this will be a nice representation of what a really supportive doctor visit can look like as well.
Yeah, love it. I love all of it. Whitney, on a slightly different note, I do have this worry that kids are reading less and less these days, and I think that's backed by some of the data. In our own household, just to be candid, right? My husband just got our 4-year-old his first programmable robot, for example, which they built together, and there's no shortage of fun, engaging, very high-tech things to do in our house, if I'm being honest. And sometimes I worry that when we engage in these things, which are great, right, and still shared activities and amazing, we're sort of leaving books to the side a bit. So my question to you is, how do we sell kids on the fun of reading when there's so many other things these days that they can engage with?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think that's where the characters come in. I think books that have really engaging characters are so important. My kids are fans, or my youngest is a fan of Diary of a Wimpy Kid, because there's fun, engaging little pictures in there. There are fun stories. Part of this book, we really put in some gross facts about bodies. We put in some hey, you might not know this, but here's something that's really cool about your body, that you can share with your friends. So I think that there are opportunities like that within books. The other thing I think is building, and this is why I'm building kind of the curriculum with schools, is trying to tie these books into a larger platform where kids can see these characters in a broader sense and not just as static, images. How can they see them as characters that can come alive for them? So I think that's part of having conversations with our kids around characters in books like this, is making it so that it's not just a kid who lives separately in a book, but a character you can kind of talk about, or you can have more conversations around. The other thing in the book, which this brings up, is talking to kids directly about how screens are great, but sometimes they can make us feel worse about our bodies as well. So in the book, we talk directly to kids about becoming kind of a body detective. When I see this show, when I look at this app, when I do this thing on my screen, does this make me feel better about my body, or does this actually make me feel a whole lot worse about my body? And then also this concept of teaching kids how to be filters instead of sponges. So a screen instead of a sponge. So, on a window screen, it lets in air, but it keeps out bugs, for example, versus a sponge, it just takes on every single thing that comes its way. And so teaching kids that skill is really important, especially right now in the digital age of AI, in social media, when things can be manipulated, when anybody out there can put up anything and talk about it as gospel truth. Really important that we're giving kids that message as well. But I don't know if we can ever have books 100% compete with the quick pace of a screen. I do think, though, this is a muscle we can help kids to build over time, and that creating engaging characters in a book is one way to do that, for sure.
Yeah. And it goes back to that literacy piece that you were talking about, right? Literacy about your body, but also literacy about what you consume and the activities that you do and how they make you feel. So definitely, it all ties together. And I appreciate the care that you've put into, again, the characters, but also the bigger thinking about how all of this can come alive for kids. I'll tell you one thing I'm trying in our house. I'm trying to let my kiddo see me reading. I think there's so much.
Yes.
He just sees me. He sees me on my phone. He sees me cooking. He sees me, cleaning up and doing things. But he rarely sees me relaxing and reading. And I just, I'm just picking little things to focus on. That is my one for right now. I'm going to let him see me sitting down and reading. And we'll see if he comes and sits next to me and wants to read. So far, he's done it a few times. So I'm going to call that a win. Whitney, we like to end our show with what we call a parenting prescription, knowing that we want all parents listening to read your book to get all the wisdom and nuance. What would you say is the key take-home message when it comes to body positivity and fostering it in our kids?
Yeah. So I love the body positivity movement. I think it absolutely had a place. I actually love the term body confidence even more because I think body confidence gives us room as parents and gives kids room as younger people to have bad days sometimes, to accept the body we're in, to want to continue to take care of the body that we have, and also to have compassion for ourselves when we don't feel great about ourselves. That is how we build resilience, is that we develop coping skills and we learn how to access resources when things are not going our way, when we do not feel great. And so I think that's the biggest takeaway from this book, is that it's really about how to give kids those skills, how to give kids those resources that they can use for a lifetime of body confidence and having that really healthy relationship with their body, with food, with movement over time.
Body confidence. I'm going to change the way I speak about it too, Whitney. Thank you so much for joining us today, Dr. Whitney Casares.
Thank you so much for having me.